Should we read the passage? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد أوحينا إلى موسى أن أسر بعبادي واضرب لهم طريقا في البحر يبسا لا تخاف دركا ولا تخشى فأتبعهم فرعون بجنوده فغشيهم من اليم ما غشيهم وأضل فرعون قومه وما هدى. يا بني إسرائيل قد أنجيناكم من عدوكم وواعدناكم جانب الطور الأيمن ونزلنا عليكم المن والسلوى. كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم ولا تطغوا فيه فيحل عليكم غضبي ومن يحمل عليه غضبي فقد هوى. وإني لغفار لمن تاب وآمن وعمل صالحا ثم اهتدى. وما أعجلك عن قومك يا موسى؟ قال هم أولئك على أثري وعجلت إليك رب لترضى. قال فإنا قد فتنا قومك من بعدك وأضلهم السامري. فرجع موسى إلى قومه غضبان أسفا قال يا قوم ألم يعدكم ربكم وعدا حسنا أفطال عليكم العهد أم أردتم أن يحل عليكم غضب من ربكم فأخلفتم موعدي. قالوا ما أخلفنا موعدك بملكنا ولكننا حملنا أوزارا من زينة القوم فقذفناها فكذلك ألقى السامري. فأخرج لهم عجلا جسدا له خوار فقالوا هذا إلهكم وإله موسى فنسي. أفلا يرون ألا يرجع إليهم قولا ولا يملك لهم ضرا ولا نفعا. ولقد قال لهم هارون من قبل يا قوم إنما فتنتم به وإن ربكم الرحمن فاتبعوني وأطيعوا أمري. قالوا لن نبرح عليه عاكفين حتى يرجع إلينا موسى. قال يا هارون ما منعك إذ رأيتهم ضلوا ألا تتبعني أفعصيت أمري؟ قال يا ابن لا تأخذ بلحيتي ولا برأسي إني خشيت أن تقول فرقت بين بني إسرائيل ولم ترقب قولي. قال فما خطبك يا سامري؟ قال بصرت بما لم يبصروا به فقبضت قبضة من أثر الرسول فنبذتها وكذلك سولت لي نفسي. قال فاذهب فإن لك في الحياة أن تقول لا مساس وإن لك موعدا لن تخلفه وانظر إلى إلهك الذي ظلت عليه عاكفا لنحرقنه ثم لننسفنه في اليم told, we revealed to Musa to go out at night with my servants and strike a dry path for them across the sea. That's the Red Sea. And you should have no fear of being caught or being overtaken by Fir'aun. No drowning in the sea as you cross. Fir'aun pursued them with his armies, and he was overwhelmed by the sea. Fir'aun truly led his people astray. He did not guide them. Children of Israel, we rescued you from your enemies. We made a pledge with you on the right-hand side of the mountain, that's Mount Sinai. We sent down manna and quails for you, and manna was sent. Eat from the good things we have provided for you, but do not overstep the bounds, or my wrath will descend upon you. Anyone on whom my wrath descends has truly fallen. Yet I am most forgiving towards those who repent, believe, do good deeds, and stay on the right track. Musa, Allah says, what has made you come ahead of your people in such haste? He said, they are following in my footsteps. I rush to you because I want to please you. Allah said, we have tested your people in your absence. The Samiri has led them astray. Musa went back to his people, angry and aggrieved. He said, my people, did your Lord not make you a gracious promise? Was my absence too long for you? Did you want anger to fall on you from the Lord, and so broke your word to me? They said, we did not break our word to you deliberately. We were burdened with the weight of people's jewelry, so we threw it away, and the Samiri did the same thing. But he used the jewelry to produce an image of a calf, which made a longing sound. And they said, this is your God, and Moses' God, but he has completely forgotten. Did they not see that the calf gave them no answer, that it had no power to harm or benefit them? Aaron did say to my people, this calf is a test for you. Your true Lord is the Lord of mercy, so follow me and obey my orders. But they replied, saying, we shall not give up our devotion to it until Musa comes back to us. Musa said, when you realized that they had gone astray, Harun, what prevented you from coming after me? How could you disobey my orders? He said, son of my mother, let go of my beard and my hair. I was afraid that you would say, you have caused division among the children of Israel, and have not heeded what I said. Musa said, and what was the matter with you, Samiri? He replied, I saw something they did not see. I took in some of the teachings of the messenger, that is Jibreel alayhi salam, but tossed them aside. My soul then prompted me to do what I did. Musa said, get away from here. Your lot in this life is to say, do not touch me, but you have an appointment from which there is no escape. Look at your God which you have kept on worshipping. We shall rend it down, scatter it into the sea. Your true God is the one God, there is no God but him, whose knowledge embraces everything. It's a very lengthy passage, but it's well connected, that's why we needed to cover the whole thing. think we still have something hanging from last week's conversation. Someone asked a very important question. You know, we had the main idea last week was that for Musa alayhi salam to be able, you know, in Moses' time, the Pharaonic civilization was literally the most leading civilization on earth. So for the people to be inspired and see some value to what Musa had, they need to really see something that is more promising than what the Egyptian civilization had. And we've looked into this through the lens of the verse that says, that the new civilizations will have to swallow the existing civilizations and actually absorb those civilizations and bring what is even more glamorous, what is more practical, what is more neat, what is more beautiful, something that is more inspiring to the people. And we led us to talk about three key pillars that define how civilizations rise and how they decline and how they fall. And we mentioned, borrowing from Malik ibn Nabi, the famous Algerian philosopher, three worlds. He talks about the world of ideas, or principles, or values. And then the world of individuals. That includes people, includes leaders, and then we have the world of things. So this is عالم الأفكار, عالم الأشخاص, عالم الأشياء. So every civilization begins with an idea or a value. Then it needs to have people that embody those ideas or those values. So those values without the people that embody them are empty. And then the combination of ideas and individuals end up with not only spiritual nourishment, spiritual improvement, but also intellectual and material development. That you end up with things, means, and tools. But those tools serve those ideas. Right? Who guides the process are the individuals that have been inspired by those ideas. That's literally how civilizations rise and fall. The question that we would ask last week was, where are we as Muslims today? Which is a really tough question that Muslims have been dealing with for a long, long time. The Muslim civilization started to dwindle, literally. You may argue, let's establish some facts first. Okay, if we are to apply this to the Islamic civilization, the primary ideas that Islam began with are embodied in the first verses and the first chapters that were revealed of the Quran. So here you may identify various ideas that Islam came with. So ideas, the first word that was revealed of the Quran was Iqra. Read. Right? That means reading is a very specific value to this tradition. And you don't just read actually says, read in the name of your Lord. اقرأ باسم ربك. Read in the name of your one Lord. That Lord, by definition, teaches. And He creates, and Him, the Quran gives a lengthy description of Allah after that. The first idea then that came to the Prophet ﷺ was to do with this, reading in the name of Allah. And in the next chapters, how to do with, revelation coming to guide the people, take them from darkness into light, from the associated partners of Allah to be dedicated to one Lord. Islam came up with various ideas, but the foundational ones are basically monotheism, linking and connecting people to God. The means are so many. Education is one of them, actually the most primary one as a tool of learning. But you may list a lot of principles that Islam came up with. Some of them are spiritual, others are intellectual, and there are still others that are political. That's in terms of ideas. And then you have individuals. Whenever we think of the best generation that has really managed to put those ideas into practice, we think of the first generation that lived with the Prophet ﷺ. So first, the Prophet himself was an embodiment of the ideas that he called for. And the people that lived with him, especially those that literally grew up with him in Mecca, the time when the earliest Muslim generation was being formed is particularly important, because these are the people that really have witnessed the birth of Islam. So you've had individuals who embodied these ideas. Reading, appreciating knowledge. I mean, this is just a symbol. I mean, this is being told, read, the word read, is being said to a community that only had a handful of people who were capable of writing and reading. But the Quran is literally transforming them from a culture of illiteracy to one of literacy. That's a foundational and transformational idea. These are the foundational ideas we're talking about. So the Prophet ﷺ was himself an embodiment of this. Ideas like equality, that's why he had the likes of Bilal ibn Rabah and other companions. So we've had definitely companions who embodied these ideas, who managed to stand up for Islam in the beginning of it, and stand by what they believe to be true. Right? So we had individuals who could carry those principles forward. After the Prophet ﷺ did not see much in terms of the world of things. As in Muslims, when they when they had a Muslim community in Medina, it was a very basic community. Yes, the Prophet was a leader to that community, but if you visit his house, he's not like a king. He's just very basic. His life was one of the toughest of lives that he had. But after the Prophet ﷺ, the Muslim world expanded dramatically in terms of things. What we mean by things is a very broad term that applies to positions, tools, anything that really stands for means that you need in order to serve those ideas. So one of the beautiful things about this early phase of Islam, that all things that were being produced and used in that, they were there to serve values and ideas. Of course, to various degrees. We can definitely be critical of certain practices that had happened during this period. That's a different discussion. But we're trying to establish some facts at this very point. Muslims started to really decline. I'd say at 6th or 7th century of Islam. When those values, the values that we've introduced to the world, started somehow to be weakened inside us, ourselves, in various ways, spiritually, intellectually, philosophically, theologically, ritually. That's why Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, one of the most important figures in the Islamic tradition, who lived in the 5th to the 6th century of Islam, talks about this. إحياء علوم الدين. He comes up with this great encyclopedic work. It's called The Revivification of Religious Sciences, because he does see some change that had crept into the Muslim mind. It's not as it used to be. That's why he looks about the revival. What does he want to revive? He wants to revive those ideas, the ideas that made the first generation. And then other scholars after that came up with other projects. But roughly the 6th to the 7th century of Islam were the times when Muslims started to decline. This decline was not deeply felt. It was deeply felt by the likes of Al-Ghazali, the author of this book. But at a societal level, we only started to realize this when we encountered the West. That is roughly 18th century Christian era. Through colonialization, basically. When Muslims started to really see different things, different products, different means, guns, and different, ways of running wars and this and that. So the world back then was not as connected as it is today. So if you live in Syria, you wouldn't know what is happening in even neighboring countries. Village system, everyone just runs their own business and that's it. In today's world, we definitely feel it much more than that. So, by the 6th or the 7th century, 5th, 6th, 7th century, Muslims, especially Muslim scholars, started to really feel this. They started to feel that we have lost the foundational ideas, the foundational values, the foundational principles that really have made the first generation. Second, we've lost the people who are the carriers of those ideas, who are the manifestations of those ideas. We don't have as many of them. So we don't have inspirational figures anymore. And therefore, the things we produce are, somehow they have reached a rigid point. We have not been really producing that much, which is known today as the phase of stagnation. You reach a moment of stagnation. You're not producing as you used to be. Again, this was not deeply felt until Muslims saw a massive difference when they encountered the West. When they encountered the West through colonialization, Muslims started to analyze, to pose, and ask, what is the problem? What is wrong with us? Or is there anything wrong with us to begin with? And Muslims, as a response, developed various answers. You had Muslims who would say, we're absolutely fine. And what they started to do is just to become nitpickers. This Western world, maybe it is, in terms of materials, it's advanced, but they are morally corrupt, spiritually bankrupt. You can't really trust them. We don't want to be like them. We are still superior. That's one response. Another response was, no, it's actually the complete opposite. We've been sleeping for a long time. We just need to catch up with them. What is the solution? Just copy them. So you had one side that completely rejected the West, and actually instead of learning something, they kept accusing the West. The other response is the complete opposite. are people that believe the only way forward is just copy and paste. In the middle, you have various responses as well. The mainstream position was simply we really try and learn, the good things and avoid the bad things. Regardless of those various responses, we don't have the time to cover those responses. To give credit as well to the man who came up with this framework, just to give you, if you want to search, and his name is Malik bin Nabi, an Algerian philosopher who died in 1973. So, Malik bin Nabi is a great philosopher who, when he came to study those Muslim responses, he wasn't really happy with this analysis. He thought this is a really superficial, a facile analysis of things. These are extremist responses, either complete rejection or complete acceptance. Instead of instead of defining our position as to the Western civilization, we need to just pause and analyze ourselves. Instead of trying to pick what the problems are with the Western civilization, or whether we should copy or just keep away, we need to pause and analyze what went wrong with us. Then Malik ended up with this framework, world of ideas, how it ended up analyzing how do civilizations rise, how do they decline and fall. And he ends up with this analysis. Some of this analysis is mine, but the framework is his, literally. Then he started by looking at, before him there was another, just to give you an idea of how difficult, I'm talking about the work of 200 years, when Muslims, again, were really grappling with these ideas. What went wrong with us? I hope everyone attended here realizes that there is a problem with the Muslim law. Don't tell me there is no problem, we'll find. So I take this as a given fact. Another guy that is so important before I come to Malik bin Nabi is called Al-Kawakibi, an Algerian intellectual historian who died in 1907, if I'm not mistaken. Al-Kawakibi, Al-Kawakibi came up, he tried again to ask the same question, what went wrong with us? So he came up with a book, he authored a book that is called al-Quran, the mother of all nations, where he imagined a conference of Muslim intellectual leaders. And he asked them, what went wrong with Muslims? He came up, out of this conference, he came up with 85 factors that have afflicted the Muslim world. He imagined that conference to gather people from different parts of the Muslim world. India, Pakistan, Egypt, Syria, every single part of the Muslim world. And they gathered all in Mecca. That's why he called al-Quran. What he did is that he compiled all those 85 factors in one book, and he published the book as al-Quran. After a couple of years, he realized that somehow there is a unifying thread between those 85 factors, which he identified as despotism. That is istibdad. He basically believed that despotism runs across the Muslim world. When we think of despotism, he says, we often think of it as something to do with leaders, with political leaders, but he said, actually this is something that exists in every single dimension of the Muslim life. Just look at fathers and how they educate their kids. Look at teachers, how they educate the students. Do they leave a space for the student to develop a critical mind or not? Does it even occur to the mind that my student should not be a copy of me, but rather should be a free thinker, so to speak? Look at how parents define the future of the kids instead of letting them be their own, right? He looks at despotism from this perspective. It is not just a political thing; it's a societal thing. Malik bin Abi definitely benefited from al-Kawakib. He came later, but he actually started to put this in a framework. And he said, our problems, some of them are to do with, he says, some of them are to do with our principles, that is, a lot of ideas, with our values. Some of them are to do with our individuals, the individuals that we have. And some of them are to do with the tools that we have. So he says, let's look at the ideas that really made Islam Islam in the very beginning. And he asks the question of why those ideas? Why is it that those ideas, they are with us in the Quran, but they are not as effective as they used to be? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with us? Either there's something wrong with us, or there's something wrong with the Quran itself. He started to ask really those serious questions. And then he came up with something that he called al-afkar al-mayyita. والأفكار المميتة. الأفكار الميتة والأفكار المميتة. He basically says we have two types of ideas: the dead ideas and the deadly ideas. The dead ideas are ideas that we literally transmit, that we just copy from the past, thinking that because they have worked in the past, they will work today naturally in our own context when we are living 14 centuries after when they first emerged. He calls these al-afkar al-mayyita, the dead ideas. Even though they might have been effective back then, they're not as effective now because it's a different context. You need to understand the culture of your time. Then, al-afkar al-mayyita, the deadly ideas, he says these are the ideas that we just transmit from the West without really understanding whether they are good for us, they go in line with our values or not. These are what he calls al-afkaru al-mumita. These ones can kill the Muslim mind. That's in terms of ideas. In terms of individuals, he does realize that we lack the individuals who can carry those ideas and live them. He talks about Muslims lacking the culture of action. And instead we have Muslims who have the culture of just speaking instead of working. It's not just that sometimes you have a good idea, but you don't really act upon it. The Quran often combines both having faith and doing good. And then in terms of things, he says, our problem is not one of things. He says, actually we have plenty of means. But the problem is that those means, which at some point they were mere means, they have become goals in themselves. How many times did you come across a Muslim who say, I really want to buy this car, I really want to buy or get this thing, no matter what, you don't really have no idea what the purpose of it is. So those things, even though we have a lot of things today, there are two primary issues with those things that we have today. One, we are not the ones that have produced those things, so we don't really know how they should be used and that. Second, when we introduced things in the past, these things were used as tools, not goals. But for us, we take them as goals in themselves because we have become deeply materialistic somehow. So, for my mind, I find Malik bin Nabi's proposals very, very compelling. Probably the most compelling. I've read a lot on this area. why did Muslims decline? When did it start to happen? And I've read a lot on those different responses, the rejectionists and those who accept everything and those who are in the middle. This proposal is I mean, we don't have much time to cover really the different dimensions of it, but I'm trying to answer the question that was posed, where are we now? This man died in 1973, and he was an engineer who read philosophy, who read Islamic studies, who lived in France much of his life, but lived also in Algeria and in Cairo. An amazing thinker. He knows what he says, and just read his books. Perhaps, if you, I don't know, at some point Ahmad Mullah has written a great dissertation comparing him to another thinker that is called Edward Said. Edward Said is a Palestinian in origin, intellectual who lived much of his life in America though. Who is often taken as a good intellectual historian who tried to analyze the Muslim life. But the key difference between him and Malik bin Nabi is that Malik was deeply busy with analyzing the Muslim mind from the inside, when Edward Said was busy with analyzing the Muslim mind from the outside. What happened to the Muslims? And then he ends up with this primary theory. It's what led Muslims to where they are now is literally colonialism. That's it. As in, if Muslims were left alone, they would have found a way. And it's just colonialism that led them where they are. To me, of course, it's obvious that I don't belong to that school, that is what Said's, mainly because, yes, colonialism has been dangerous to the Muslims, but it's just a symptom, it's not a disease. The actual disease is within us, and that's why Malik bin Nabi's approach is uniquely positioned to treat the disease and uproot it from the inside. I hope this gives you a window into where we are. Why is it that we today, we read the Quran, but we don't really get inspired by it? When we get inspired, it's just more of a spiritual thing that we just think of it. It gives us some sort of spiritual nourishment, yes, but how much of it is transformational? Why is it that we have lost that sense of efficacy as a community and even as individuals, right? I can't give any clear-cut answers, but this as a framework is very, very helpful. And the thing is, it applies to individuals as well as to societies. As in, you may apply it to yourself. What are the foundational ideas that I carry within myself? If a foundational idea to Islam was Iqra, read, how much of my time is spent in reading? When I read, do I read in Allah's name? Remembering that I am here as His servant, I am here as His worshipper, knowing my place in the world and in the universe or not. Right? These are the foundational ideas that have formed the early Muslim mind. Okay, do I live by those ideas or not? I have known them, now I know the principles, I know my values. Right? I embrace them, I believe in them. But another question is, do I practice them? Malik bin Nabi famously said, إنما يهم المسلم اليوم إنما ينقص المسلم اليوم ليس منطق الفكرة وإنما منطق العمل. That he says what Muslims lack today is not that they are absolutely corrupt and bankrupt in terms of ideas, but rather that they have lost the culture of action. فإن المسلم يبتغي أن يقول or يقرأ ليقول ولا يقرأ ليعمل. Even when we read, we don't read so that we can put this into action. We read so that we can really boast and talk to other people. And I come across as an intelligent person or something. So do I carry those ideas if I have them? And after I carry them, do I have the means to achieve them or not? And Malik bin Nabi talks about the means, he literally begins from the basics. As in, when you think of me and student, to me, you know, I can't do this because I don't have, I don't know, think of any advanced thing that you really can't get or something. He says, I'm talking about the most basic needs, and that he actually thinks that all Muslims have the most basic needs that qualify them to really rise. So we have the world of ideas, the world of individuals that can carry those ideas, and the things that they will use in order to serve the ideas we're talking about. Malik died 1973. I honestly think we have, I mean, the Muslim discourse since then have been going from bad to worse, unfortunately, as thinkers like these of that caliber are not available anymore as often as they used to be. But again, you know, I hope this gives you a helpful tool. At least, if not at the society level, at the individual level, where am I as to this map? Again, I mean, it would be unfair to ask for, you know, some sort of a platform where we can share ideas at this very point, because I'm trying to summarize a lot of readings that I've had in the past 20 years or something. So what I recommend, perhaps, that if you guys are interested in this question, what happens to the Muslim mind, I think this man is a good starting point. Malik may not be Edward Said if you wish, but just be careful, because you know we have those internal lens and external ones. They should not be seen as mutually exclusive, but always begin with the disease, not the symptom. Very interesting subject. I'm trying to really stop myself because it's a very important subject, and we really need to keep ourselves busy with it. But yes.
May I ask just one question?
Sure.
Thank you for answering the first part. There's the second part, if you can briefly touch on it. I know you don't have so much time. What's the way for the current Muslim world with the way out of what they are in?
Okay. What is the way out?
From what you think and you read.
What is the way out?
We can leave it to next week.
If we take it that Iqra was a leading idea, read, a leading idea, a leading value in the Islamic tradition. That means we, you know, as a foundational principle, this thing, read, in the name of Allah, needs to take a foundational place again. If you remember from last week, we were talking about Musa alayhi salam having to come with, you know, and within Pharaoh's circle, they thought that what Musa brought is magic. To them, this is magic. But it's a better magic. It's a better form of magic that is better than the one that we have. Right? That's what we are after. You need to really come up with something that is more original than the world of ideas, and for that you need to read. When I say to read, you need to really absorb your own tradition, beginning with the Quran itself, and then be well read in today's world. You know, as a Muslim, you should not be someone who is just not knowing what is going around. A good example. How many Muslims in today's Muslim world study philosophy? Philosophy today is seen as a subject that is, you know, first of all, humanities as a whole, as a subject area, compared to STEM subjects. STEM subjects are an important area, but it remains in the world of things, right? The world of ideas are the ones. The world of ideas are the ones that are there in the humanities area. You can't have things without having ideas, without having values, without having principles. These are the things that you get to study in theology, that you get to study in philosophy, that you get to study in psychology, that you get to study in sociology, in history. Where are those subjects in the Muslim world today? The people who study them, when they graduate, they probably won't find jobs. Mainly because the job market is looking for engineers. Job market is looking for medical doctors. I'm not blaming them, because this is the world where we are. But I'm not trying to analyze what is with us, but that's a good starting point. Just look at our points of interest today. If I have a kid and I really want them to secure a good job in the future, put them into medicine, put them into engineering, put them into pharmacy, right? All in the world things, almost. How about my kids' mentality, my kids' mindset? Today, wallahi, if you look at the most dominant civilizations today in the world that are competing in front of our own eyes, it's just a competition of ideas. Capitalism versus socialism. Capitalism versus modernism versus postmodernism. Modernism versus traditionalism. It's at the essence of it, it's ideas. It's philosophies. When you lack a philosophy, when you don't philosophize, someone else will philosophize for you. Literally. And then what you end up with is just following. And you will always be following. And when you wake up, it will be too late for you to just catch up. You'll always be in that adaptation stage. So, and I'm really glad that I just remembered the STEM humanities thing, because this literally at the essence of what we're talking about. We have become so obsessed with the world of things, and we left the world of ideas through our marginalizing of ideas and philosophies and these things. The Muslim is meant to be a balanced person, definitely. We're not saying these are bad subjects or something. No. Far from it. They are very important. We need them. But get your priorities right. And we're not asking Muslims to all be philosophers or theologians or thinkers or something. But just we're trying to understand what the problem is. When you have some form of an imbalance, that's so dangerous. So I need to really understand my own tradition, read, absorb it, so that I get to understand what really was foundational to me. How did I make it in the past? What ideas can I borrow from the past? Not everything that worked in the past can work today. Right? What ideas can I borrow from the West? I mean, today we can't literally speak of Islam and the West as such, because we live in the West. So you may speak Islam in the West, not Islam and the West. It's because we are part of the West today. So how do we deal with that? So I really need to understand and absorb this very culture, so that I can, out of this combination, I can come up with something that is original. So until you have Muslims who read and absorb, and they merge this with a culture of action, like I really, if I learn something, not talking professional stuff, like I said, idea of being consistent, being professional, being honest, being transparent. The most basic things, the most basic thing that you can introduce to your own life, that you have, no one to blame but you. I know that the Quran is so valuable. What is stopping me from having a committed relationship with the Quran? What is, if I'm an non-native speaker of Arabic, what is stopping me from learning Arabic so that I can have direct communication with the Quran? Basic things. Even though I have tools, I have YouTube and social media and all these, so many valuable tools, I don't really know how to use them. So, again, read. And what I mean by read is not just any normal reading, I mean effective reading. A reading that knows, when we speak of selective reading, or quality reading, you have hundreds and probably thousands of millions of people who read. But how do I really have that sense of selectivity? Why do I read? I'm reading so that I can really, feed my mind with good ideas that will help me rise. So that's a foundational idea that you may begin with. And don't to me, because I'm a physicist or I'm a mathematician or something, I have nothing to do with philosophy. At least understand, what do I stand for? What do I believe in? These are, that's a foundation, but that would take us a good conversation, like I said, for us to really sit and talk about, okay, let's try and come up with a list of values. If only we revive those values, we can become something. That takes a good discussion on its own. And then how do we put this into practice ourselves? We can definitely have literally not just a talk, we have even a course on that. A course that can look at those three various areas. The area of the world of ideas, or values, or principles, the world of individuals, and the world of things. I'm up for it to actually design a course on that. I'm entirely sure this session is never enough, and I haven't planned what I'm talking about now. I'll come to you. As I can't really just put on my mind. I mentioned this as just something that came to my mind. So, what can we take as a foundational idea that really can help us really rise again? What can we pick from the past, and what should we, think of the I don't know, name groups, but I'm pretty sure you've seen a lot of Muslims who would say, if only we go back and just to the past and imitate and copy the first Muslim generations, we would do it. But that's not really the solution, because this was a different context, a different historical moment. Yes, there are things that you can pick, but also there are things that you really can't introduce. If you introduce it here today, you'll be shaming Islam and shaming Muslims, right? So you have things to do with the world of ideas, and again, things to do with the world of individuals in terms of having Muslims who just practice what they preach, live what they believe, literally. And also the world of things. I mean, I keep going back to the same ideas, but I mean, I do realize we do need to have I read a post on that. How do we analyze those things? And we'll need to have some more detailed analysis of foundational ideas that can help. And what are the dead things, if we try to revive, they would actually do more harm than good.
Sheikh, what is taqwa? Because in my head I'm thinking intuitively, if the first half is iqra, then I'm thinking there's a second half, taqwa. Like when you're saying the civilization from Said, they were saying like colonialism, it's sort of, that was, I guess, was a cause for the downfall, I guess, or like it's one of the main factors. I'm thinking, okay, wait, like, how do you get in that position where colonialism affects you? So I'm thinking,
sure, absolutely. Thank you for that example. This guy was so intelligent, and instead of focusing, he calls it himself. He calls it colonizability. Actually says the problem is not with colonialism. That's actually with the fact that you are colonizable, and that's why he ends up with this analysis of the internal Muslim mind. Taqwa is definitely a foundational idea, and you may read in the name of your Lord, in the name of your Lord constitutes taqwa, definitely. But this is what I'm talking about. We could definitely have a conversation on those foundational values. Is taqwa one of them? Is reading one of them? We could definitely grapple with those ideas more deeply. But I was just trying to draw a map so that we can help situate ourselves on this map. Really conscious of time. It's 1 hour. My apologies. Well, I didn't plan this. I was hoping to finish the passage we recited. We haven't even touched it.
It's 2 pages.
That's true. But as we promised, it's just a 1 hour session. But again, maybe we need to develop this into a course, and then that we can grapple with those ideas more vividly and more deeply. What are the foundational ideas? I have things in my mind, but I really want to have this as a more structured conversation. And thanks to Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, since we started Surah Taha, we've been introduced to so many foundational ideas to do with the rise of civilizations. And I did say that I meant it, if you are after the formation of a leader, read Musa alayhi salam in the Quran. If you are after the formation of a thinker, read Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran. So the first thing that really captures your attention about Ibrahim is intellect. The first thing that captures our attention about Musa is his leadership. So Surah Taha was our window into this. And hopefully, inshallah, perhaps we can try and apply those ideas. I think the passage we've recited today has a lot to do with this as well. So we can hopefully next week, inshallah, when we get to meet, we can look into this and analyze that, inshallah. Again, my apologies if the class went in different direction. My promise, inshallah, this won't happen again. Inshallah, we'll meet up next week. Subhanallah, Muhammad, inshallah, la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.